In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ is risen. Tonight is Class 18 of our Orthodox Survival course. We've had a bit of a break because of Holy Week and Pascha. And this is a Friday night of the Bright Week, 2018. In our last class, we finished talking about the Renaissance period. Tonight we're going to begin talking about the so-called Enlightenment period. Of course, we jokingly say as Orthodox, it's not the Enlightenment, it's the Endarkenment, because so many bad ideas and so many bad things were done. And the Enlightenment really has two phases. We know from now on, starting the Renaissance until now Western so-called Christian or European culture really has two parts, the public and the secret. And tonight we're going to talk about the public, things that were published, things that were well known. And next week we're going to talk about the secret, or the conspiracies, the occult societies and so forth that really took off during this period and prepared the overthrow of the Christian monarchies and the destruction of the Christian order of Europe. So when we say the Enlightenment, what are we talking about? Roughly, we're talking about the period between the Renaissance and the period of revolutions that began in 1789 and continues to today. This is a time, this so-called Enlightenment is a time of enormous scientific efforts. It's the age of Newton, right? The age of Newtonian physics, Newtonian science. And intense philosophical development, all of which actually is bad, which we're going to discuss in a little while. With the rise of the rival schools of so-called British empiricism and continental rationalism, which I'll talk about a little later. This period, that is, we're talking about the 17th century and the 18th century, right? It's a period in which the so-called Leviathan state emerges. Massively powerful central government, okay, funded on an enormous scale by central banking, by loans. So we talked about last time the whole usury racket, right? And possessing a huge, permanent, professional, technologically advanced, and constantly technologically advancing, constantly getting new and more powerful technology, civil bureaucracy and military apparatus. Okay? This is the period it really comes into being. It starts in the Renaissance, but it really blossoms, so to speak, in the 17th and 18th centuries. It's also the age of the explosion of European colonialism, where the Western Europeans go to every corner of the world and establish colonies and conquer territories and so forth. And the mercantilist economic system, by which governments and privately chartered corporations working with the banks create this whole economic system with the government and the corporations are hand in glove. So it's a forerunner of what today we call crony capitalism or corporate welfare, where they talk about capitalism, they talk about free enterprise, but it's really always a favored oligarchy, right? That's hand in glove with the government. And this goes all the way back to this period. So obviously there's a lot going on here, and we can't cover everything in this period. Okay? It would take a 2-semester course just to give a survey of the period, much less an in-depth examination. For example, we're not really going to go into the art of the period, because the developments in the sacred art of this period just keep extending the lines of what we've already talked about. So we've pretty well covered how art departed from the Orthodox way. We've covered how theology departed from the Orthodox way. Now we're going to be focusing more on philosophy and politics and economics. And because what happened was in the West, really, theology is dethroned in favor of philosophy. Okay? And after the age of the revolution started, philosophy was dethroned in favor of politics. Okay? So now people can only think they're being very clever by just watching Fox News or reading about politics, you see, because that's the highest level they can think on. They can't think philosophically. They certainly can't think theologically. See, so understanding the philosophical mistakes that were made in this period really helps us to understand some of the fundamental errors that people today take for granted, so they cannot get out of their problems, even in their thinking. And even if we still have outward problems, at least if our spiritual lives are in order and our thinking, our philosophical lives are in order, then we can understand what's going on around us. But if we have such fundamental errors within us, we can't really cope with what's going on around us. We have no way of understanding what's going on around us. And we have Orthodox, all of us, we're Orthodox people, but we live in this society, and we're often reacting to things around us and just taking sides with different groups, none of which have the right answer, none of which certainly have orthodoxy. So it's important to get to some of these really fundamental false ideas that undergird our modern society. That's one of the reasons why we're here, or the main reason why we're here. Okay. For our purposes, for our meta-history, as we've spoken of it before, with an Orthodox lens that we're constructing for our survival toolbox, I want to limit our discussion to the most essential topics and break it into two parts. Tonight, we're going to discuss the ideas that are key to the Enlightenment, just some of the ideas, not all of them. Okay? And next week, we're going to talk about the history of the secret societies, which aggressively begin to infiltrate the ruling elites. And they begin the process of the active overthrow of the Christian order of altar and throne. Okay? And this characterized the European world since the altar and throne. Remember, we talked about this much earlier, right? The sacerdotium and the imperium, this unity characterized the Christian order of Europe from the time of St. Constantine. Then supposedly suddenly, it starts being overthrown in 1789. Actually, this is planned long in advance. Right? Tonight we'll discuss Enlightenment ideas. Next week we'll talk about the conspiracy that led up to the opening of the revolutionary era. So there are some really bad ideas. The two main philosophical schools of the 17th and 18th centuries are called empiricism and rationalism. Empiricism from the Greek word empiria, which means experience. So a philosophy based on sense experience, the sensate, the evidence of the senses. And then rationalism, of course in Latin ratio, reason, a philosophy based strictly on human reason. And they're known as continental rationalism and British empiricism because the rationalist philosophers were from the European continent, mainly French and German. And the empiricists were mainly from the British Isles, usually English, Scottish, or Anglo-Irish. Okay. Rationalism is the idea that real knowledge comes from your inner thought processes, from reason. Okay. Empiricism is the idea that real knowledge comes from sense experience. Anything besides sense experience is a lie.
So there is no God.
There's no nothing. There's just sense experience. Okay. In this period, we find the rationalists primarily on the European continent, such as men like Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and Kant. You've heard all these names before, but this is who they're the rationalists. Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and Kant. And in college, I had to, as a philosophy major, of course, I had to take a survey in continental rationalism and another survey in British empiricism. And you can only, even a survey like that, you just barely touch on these people. They wrote reams and reams and reams of stuff, but I guarantee you could summarize their philosophy in a few words and you're not missing anything if you don't read their books. Okay. We find the empiricists primarily in the British Isles, such as Locke, Hobbes, Berkeley, and Hume. This division of the Europeans as the rationalists and the Anglos as the empiricists continues to this day. Or the whole Anglo-Saxon approach is empirical, is pragmatic, only dealing with practical matters, right? And the Europeans are always constantly inventing new ideologies, coming up with new ideas that they think are going to, Napoleon's great ideas, right, for centralizing everything and creating a rational order for Europe. So this tendency even extends into our own time, but it was clearest in the 17th and 18th centuries. Both approaches are reductionistic, right? They're always reducing it to something. They're reducing the whole to just its parts, or they're picking on a part and saying you can only rely on this part. Only this part is true. Only this part is important. The rest is bunk. See, and they keep reducing and reducing to the point where by the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, we have nihilism, nothingism. It's reduced to nothing. Right? Okay.
So what does it to the people's brain?
It destroys their capacity for thought. Right? So the whole project of modern philosophy is to gradually destroy a human being's conviction that he can have certain knowledge of truths, right? That's the whole project of modern philosophy.
Confusion.
It's confusion, yes, and skepticism, and ultimately despair.
And those come from spirit.
So, yes, obviously it's of demonic origin, right? Remember, we talked about Descartes in one of our classes recently, how he had dreams or spirits told him he was the greatest philosopher of all time. See, so Descartes is the great rationalist, right? He claims it's all about his reason, but he embarked upon this project with a so-called a blessing, so to speak, from spirits that appeared in a dream and told him that in 3 successive dreams when he was living in the Netherlands, and told him he was the greatest philosopher of all time. Okay.
So come.
Yeah, it's obviously a spiritual problem, right?
The Bolsheviks, they're the same.
Yeah, they're the same. Yeah. Okay. So they're always going in the direction of skepticism about the possibility of knowing and sharing knowledge of what is real. Now, note that what I'm about to say is very important. The juxtaposition of these two things, right? And the cognitive dissonance caused by these two things. At the same time, the physical and social sciences are making greater and greater claims to be able to explain everything. And moreover, to dominate human life in every aspect. Okay? To create a new world based on science. Okay? So while simultaneously the philosophers and the educators, the ideological leaders are telling the people, really, you really can't know all we thought we used to know. You know less and less and less and less and less about God, about the meaning of your life, about ultimate reality, even the reality in front of you. But at the same time, they're telling, but science knows everything, and science will tell you how to live.
And they also say that if there is no answer today, in near future,
we'll find one. Mm-hmm. Right. So theology has been dethroned by philosophy. In the course of the Renaissance, they dethrone theology and they exalt philosophy. And philosophy progressively claims that less and less wisdom is possible. So then the empirical sciences dethrone philosophy, and finally politics just share the struggle for power. The rats fighting for the food in the box, right? That dethrones everything and just becomes the law of the jungle. Okay? These sciences claim they have more and more answers, but their method and their whole direction is ever more and more minute, detailed analysis of phenomena. So greater and greater fragmentation all the time. And they create an inversion of what the traditional concept of knowledge is. The traditional concept of knowledge is that knowledge of the whole is greater than knowledge of any part of the whole, or even knowledge and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay? Common sense tells you that. Intuition tells you that. And certainly in the spiritual life, that's very true. It's very true. And it's really true about every common sense aspect of life. We all know the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. If you pick something apart, you kill it. Right? You can have a very strong family, but then you start analyzing every individual in the family and their hang-ups or the dynamics and say, oh, we have a terrible family. Why? Because you're getting obsessed with fragments and not seeing the whole truth. Okay? But these sciences are saying that, oh no, I'm an expert and I know about this microbe under this microscope, and I've been studying this one microbe for 50 years, so I'm smarter, I have greater knowledge than a theologian or a philosopher who has the biblical understanding of the whole universe. Because that microbe is real knowledge. You see? So it's fragmentation and obsession that Weaver talked about.
That's what they do in engineering. You are an expert even of bolt or something.
Yeah, that's why you have to tell boys who want to be engineers or going to be engineers, you have to tell them, or want to be doctors for that matter. Any science or any technology, they should get a good grounding in theology and philosophy first, and their mathematics, of course, to help, and their chemistry, their biology, but then only specialize in graduate school. Don't specialize at the college level. At the college level, they need to be reading the great books. They need to be getting deeply into their faith. They need to be able to think. They need to read good literature. They should be reading Dostoevsky. They should be reading the classics. They should, and all kinds of things. Yes, and form their worldview, and then specialize. because you can take a person if they specialize from the time they're young, they don't learn anything else. They're actually just trained monkeys, but they think they have PhDs, they think they're geniuses, and you can't tell them anything. That's why you can give them an assignment to build a nuclear bomb and press a button and go kill 5 million people, and it doesn't occur to them that that's anything wrong with that, right? Because they're so smart. They're the experts, right? So science is claiming to have greater and greater certainty, as the philosophers are telling people you can't know anything. So it creates a huge cognitive dissonance in the whole civilization, where people deep down, they know that they're insecure. They don't know. They don't know the meaning of their life. They don't know why they exist. They don't know if things exist. Okay? And at the same time, science is the technological apparatus is saying we have the answers. Just do what we say, and you'll avoid bad breath, and you'll live 2.5 years longer, and and your children will have high IQs or whatever. See, they can being assured by the high priests of the technocratic scam that they have all the answers. You see, let's talk about a couple of these people and their some fundamental really bad ideas. Tonight I'm going to talk about 3 fundamental very bad ideas: an idea about tradition, an idea about knowledge, an idea about society. Okay, the granddaddy of all the modern philosophers is René Descartes, the man who received the 3 dreams that told him he was the greatest philosopher of all time. And what you'll note about all these men is that each of them rejects all previous tradition and claims to have found a unique answer to everything, or the best philosophy, or the only true philosophy. See? So for the first time in history, men who call themselves philosophers are rejecting all previous tradition. Even the ancient Greeks who made mistakes, who had bad theories, didn't claim that. Okay? They still claimed they still acknowledged previous tradition. They were building on tradition. Okay? But now these people are consciously rejecting tradition. Okay? So René Descartes lives from 1596 to 1650. He's the father of modern philosophy. The scholastics, our friends back in the Middle Ages, Thomas Aquinas and so forth, they mistakenly tried to rationalize tradition, put it into Aristotelian boxes, and they said they were defending it, but they ended up ossifying it, right, or killing it. The nominalists mistakenly tried to correct tradition, and then you look in the Renaissance, an eclectic, wacky, really Renaissance thinkers, so-called, like Pico della Mirandola, mistakenly tried to combine Christian tradition with magic, Kabbalah, astrology, alchemy, you name it.
Maybe not mistaken.
Well, well, mistakenly, certainly in a moral sense. Yeah, I mean, he did it on purpose, of course. Okay. But at least for all their errors, they realized they had to follow some kind of tradition. They were building on some previous tradition. Descartes is the very first, as we know of in all history, to make the sweeping claim that all tradition have to be swept aside. The true philosopher is one who begins with his own thought processes. From the only certainty, the first thing you can start with, the starting point is the only thing you could really know for sure. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
It's very poisonous.
It's a terrible thing, right? It's a terrible thing. You might as well say, I'm God, right? I'm creating meaning out of my head. Okay? And he builds his entire system of thought on this one postulate. In geometry, we learned how you have hypotheses and theorems, and you build a structure, right? So Descartes builds his whole structure on this one initial theorem or postulate. This totally artificial approach, arid, dry, or totally abstract, detached from reality. Right? It's really detached from reality. Okay? It can never produce any wisdom that's satisfying to the human heart. Right? It has no warmth. It has no inspiration. It doesn't give you any sense of transcendence, right? Any sense of meaning.
Can you translate again cogito ergo sum?
I think, therefore I am.
Thank you.
Cogito ergo sum is I think, therefore I am. But this arid, abstract, dry, empty philosophy can never satisfy the human heart, right, which longs for relationship, it longs for meaning, it longs for transcendence, right? So simultaneously with the growth of rationalism, we see the explosion of the occult societies and lodges, right, with their secret rituals, their brotherhood, right, their promises of secret knowledge, to exalt and mysticism. Okay? So there's always, you see, in Christianity, you see with the growth of the more and more rationalistic, academic, really stupid Protestant and Catholic theology. It's really stupid. I mean, you can read volumes and volumes of it, and it's actually very stupid.
No Orthodox too.
Huh? Well, now the Orthodox have gotten into the act since the 20th century.
You smell it. Right?
Oh, yeah, it's terrible, and so it's very stupid, right? So the people get frustrated with it. It's ponderous, it's pretentious, and at the same time, it doesn't feed you. It doesn't mean anything. So they run so in Protestantism they run to Pentecostalism and have basically have seances, which amounts to mediumism, right? They're channeling spirits, and in Catholicism, they have these false mystics and all this kind of rigmarole, and so in outside the Christian world, there are the lodges or unfortunately sometimes within the lodges and so forth, and the occult societies, and these societies do believe in traditions. They have their own traditions, and some of them are actually, they say they're authentic. Well, some of them really are authentic. They go back to the demon worship before the flood, right? And so the rationalism is the public face, but rationalism and empiricism are the public face of people who are actually doing other kinds of things. But the philosophical ideas do take root, and they do affect how people live. Even if whether they believed in them or not, even if it's all fake, the people believe the ideas, and they live according to these ideas. Okay. So here's Locke's really bad idea. Locke had many bad ideas, but one of a fundamental idea is about knowledge. I want to introduce everybody to this book. It's a very good book by Mortimer Adler. Mortimer Adler with Dr. Hutchinson. Francis Hutchinson was the architect of the University of Chicago's humanities program and the Great Books of the Western World series. So it's called 10 Philosophical Mistakes. Adler was an Aristotelian. So he's a convert to Catholicism. He's a Jew who converted to Catholicism. And he's a follower of Thomas Aquinas. So I'm not advocating this book for Orthodox theology. That's not what the book is for. The book is to point out how modern philosophical ideas make very fundamental common sense errors. Fundamental common sense errors. And remember, the Holy Fathers do not reject Aristotle. The Holy Fathers used Aristotle to teach young men natural philosophy. And that's why St. John of Damascus devotes the second book of the Fount of Knowledge to going through Porphyry, to introduce students to Aristotle. So it's a very good weapon for thinking Orthodox Christians. A very good weapon is just to be familiar with Aristotle, because he gets to the root of so many stupid ideas that dominate the modern world. They're completely foolish, not on the theological level, just on the natural level.
So nothing new.
Nothing new under the sun, right? Well, so these ideas are not new in that some of the ancients made these mistakes. What's new is that these guys are pretending Aristotle didn't fix them, and that they have to reinvent the wheel.
They don't give you the answer.
Yeah,
Or
they don't want you to know the answer. That there are already real answers. These answers were settled because it would interfere with their project if you knew the right answers, right? So here's Locke. John Locke lived from 1632 to 1704. He had what's called a psychological theory of knowledge. So Descartes wraps himself up in his cogito ergo sum. Now Locke is going to wrap people up even more inside of themselves, right? So Mortimer Adler explains this theory. It's the first chapter, probably the most important chapter in this book, is about Locke. Okay? This book, 10 Philosophical Mistakes, I really recommend this book. Aristotle, and with him the consensus of ancient and medieval Christian thought, East and West, states that our ideas are tools by which we grasp what is out there. Okay, the idea is a tool. You can't study your ideas. Your idea is a tool. It's an energy of the intellect that's grasping a real thing, whether a sensate thing or an abstract idea, but it's grasping something that's real, that truly exists outside of yourself. And I can grasp it, you can grasp it, and our minds are constructed the same. And those things are constructed the same. They share the same universals, right? So when we talk about things, we are talking about the same thing. And we're really understanding something that's truly out there. Okay?
So it's true knowledge.
It's true knowledge, right? People can really know things. Okay, so Aristotle states our ideas are we do think by means of our ideas. We think by means of our ideas, which we use to know real things that exist outside our minds. So the traditional view is that we can really know things, and that we can share this knowledge with others. That's the foundation of human society, and sanity, right? But Locke's theory is that we do not use our ideas to know reality, but that all we know is actually just our ideas about what's out there. I don't know what's out there. I only know my ideas. I'm thinking about my ideas. We don't think, according to Locke, we don't think by using our thoughts, we just think our thoughts.
So disconnect you from reality.
Exactly. Only our sense perceptions are real. Remember, Locke is an empiricist. Only sense perception is real. What we do with the sense perception once it gets inside our mind is subjective. It's unique to each person. So this is taking the fragmentation started by nominalism a further step. At least when the nominalists said, well, those are just conventional words we assign to those things, at least they believed that they were seeing real, their minds were seeing real things, right? And that we could share the same conventions and so forth. But he's saying that you don't even know what's out there. And Hume, later on, a fellow Briton, well, actually a Scot named David Hume, was going to take this to its logical conclusion in later on in the 18th century. Okay, so Locke.
I got a question. How can people believe that?
They don't know they believe it. They don't know they believe it. The whole atmosphere is created, right? So a kid goes to university. He takes all these psychology courses. By the time he's finished, his head is spinning, right? So he takes philosophy courses. And he's heard so many contradictory opinions. And when he hears traditional opinions, they're always denigrated. And people today, 99% of people who go through university today do not come out with a coherent worldview. They don't come out with a coherent framework within which to understand what they're perceiving. So when they're told by somebody, well, truth is relative, they just go, oh yeah. That's right.
For them is relative.
Right, for them is relative. Or their way of approaching people is always psychologistic. I'm going to psychologize you. I'm going to analyze your hang-ups and your complexes. So they peel the person apart like an onion, and there's nothing left. And they think that's true knowledge because they peeled apart the onion. You see? It's reductionism as a whole approach to life. Okay? So getting back to Locke's theory, so Locke's theory is that we're all solipsists. Solipsism is from the Latin, solus ipse, himself alone. Aloneism. Right? So Locke and the empiricists in general do not care about the mind contemplating reality. They don't care if the mind can contemplate reality. They laugh at that. Okay? They don't think it's possible, or they say they don't think it's possible, whatever. They only care about the phenomena. Phenomena means appearances, right? From Greek pheno, to appear, right? They only care about the phenomena presented by sense perception. Yeah. And in the 19th century, the Vienna school of the logical positivists will take this to its logical conclusion, beyond which is just total skepticism and Nietzsche's despair. Right? It's easy to see how this leads to the inseparable twin of empiricism, which is utilitarianism or pragmatism.
You have to have
Usefulism.
You have to have something.
Get something, right? Usefulism. It's a good idea if it's useful, right? So what matters is not truth, but utility. Is it useful? And this thinking of utilitarianism comes to dominate British and American thought. So the great pragmatists are Americans, right? William James, Dewey. Okay? And because the British and Americans eventually dominate the world, right, with their empire, commercial or military empire, whatever. They spread these ideas everywhere. So you go to a little kid in India, a little kid in Africa, and they're all, if they're educated at all, if they've had any smattering of Western education, they're all a bunch of little pragmatists. See? And with the American kids, it's the air they breathe. Well, help me get a job. So it's not difficult to see how this whole mindset is totally antithetical to orthodoxy. Okay? Whose entire direction is to lead the mind up. Right? Remember we talked before about anagogy, leading the mind up. To contemplate God. Ultimately God. And then in the natural world, the wholeness of reality. How it all fits together, the beautiful symphonia of all reality. You see. So it's a terrible idea, but it goes back to Locke, and Adler discusses it very well and takes it apart very well. So now let's talk about, that's Descartes' bad idea about tradition, which is to get rid of it, start with just myself, and Locke's idea about knowledge, and now Locke's and Hobbes' idea about society. Thomas Hobbes is a little older than Locke. He's from 1588 to 1679. Locke and Hobbes' thought are the foundational, this is the foundational theory behind modern democratic or republican political thought. These are the men that the American founders studied and studied and studied and studied. Okay. And they're the founders of liberalism. And by liberalism, everybody today everybody accepts the assumptions of liberalism. I'm going to say, I don't mean you and me necessarily. I mean, but the mainstream, right? Whether they're so-called conservatives or so-called liberals, they're all liberals. They all buy into these ideas. Okay. So Hobbes and Locke are the fathers of this, the founding idea, the fundamental idea of liberal political thought, which is the social contract. The social contract. The basic idea of the social contract is this: men in their natural state are selfish individuals. It's demonic, of course. It's a very demonic idea, right? It's a kind of a demonic version of original sin. It is true that men are selfish, right? But what they're saying is that that's natural. You see? And it's individual. The individual is the starting point, not the family, not the community, not the nation. The individual is the starting point. And he's selfish, and that's good. Let's just accept it, just the way it is.
Yeah, but you cannot protect yourself.
So why? But these selfish individuals have to cooperate in order to live, right? Otherwise, you have anarchy, and people just get killed and they die, and that's it. Nothing can happen. Therefore, they create societies based on the social contract, whose guiding idea is, here it is, enlightened self-interest. You're selfish, I'm selfish. You're selfish, I'm selfish, that's cool. Let's make a deal so that we don't interfere with each other's selfishness. Okay.
And if you get sick, I'll give you $5.
If you get sick, I'll give you $5 and I'll feel good. I'll get another rank at the lodge. I'll get another award at the lodge for being a philanthropist. Right? It's taken for granted that you're selfish and I'm selfish. That's fine. That's cool. That's the way it is. Okay? Let's agree on limits to our selfishness in order to work together. So it would be against my self-interest if I supply the milk, you supply the bread. If I just kill you, well, that'd be stupid because I need your bread. I need the bread from you. So it's in favor of my selfishness to advocate your selfishness, and we'll all get selfish together. If we're smart, we can all be selfish and advance each other's interests to a certain point.
This is scary.
It's the founding idea of the United States, and of all modern, not just the United States now, everywhere. It's the founding idea of modern theory. Of course, remember, it's just theory. It's for the herd. The people at the top are just purely selfish. They don't care about us. But they're teaching it. They teach us these things, right?
Get used to it.
But the result is that Christians cannot protect themselves because they're fragmented.
They're fragmented, right?
They say there is a saying: if you have a horse cart full of pottery,
Mhm.
You just need a stick, one stick to break.
Break all the pots. Yeah. Yeah. So this an idea like this divides everybody. So of course back in the Christian concept, in the family, in the village, in the parish, in the commune, in the nation, the fundamental idea is self-sacrifice. But in this idea, the fundamental idea is selfishness. See? So laws then, they throw out, remember they're throwing everything out, everything previous gets thrown out. Now, as a matter of fact, as I've said before, they did not throw out all of tradition when they wrote the Constitution. Because they couldn't get rid of, they were reflexively the heirs of 1,500 years of political tradition from England. So they didn't throw everything out. But the bad things that are in the Constitution are all from this. The good things are all from the previous, the Christian period. So laws are designed simply to limit selfishness only to the degree needed for peaceful cooperation. That's why the so-called conservatives in America want small government, right? Of course, at this point, we all need smaller government because the government's horrible; it's evil, right? So yes, we're in favor of small government, but what they're saying is that small government is inherently better because if government's too big, I can't be selfish enough. I can't pursue my own ends, right? Whatever is, and so one of the concepts here is that whatever is not explicitly forbidden is allowed. So we allow you to make billions and billions of dollars, even though it means paying your employees $8 an hour and giving them no health insurance, because
it's not forbidden.
It's not forbidden. It's not against the law. You're pursuing your self-interest. If they have a problem with your pay scale, let them go find somebody else to work for.
It's very, very, very common.
Mm-hmm. But in America, this passes for conservatism.
Yeah.
Because they're conserving these bad ideas, right? So this is the basis for modern Republican, and Republican with small, I don't mean the Republican Party. They're part of all this, of course, but Republican with a small r, where it's post-monarchist, modern Western political thought, okay? This is the basis for all modern Republican political theory, so-called classical liberalism. Okay? There are Orthodox Christians who are Americans, and they hate the left for good reason, and the left is very worthy of hate, right? But then they run to the so-called American right and the Constitution. They don't realize the Constitution is a deeply flawed document. It is based on some of these ideas.
There is no other choice.
They feel there's no choice. That's right. But if you talk to them, but if you talk to Orthodox people about monarchy and you talk about community, they do come around. They start understand. They said, yes, that's right. Because you read the lives of the saints, and you read the teachings of the fathers about the family and about morality. It only makes sense within a Christian communitarian environment. It doesn't make sense in this dog-eat-dog competition and the rugged individual and all these American ideals that are really anti-Christian.
They will eat you up if you try to apply.
But see, the Orthodox have to realize, even if we're inside the society, we have to realize that Orthodoxy is different, and we have to try to, as much as possible, not live by these ideas. So, or at least if we are living by them, to recognize we're living by them and that they're bad, and that we pray God to forgive us and to show us a way to be more kind, to be ourselves, right? Now, Hobbes and Locke weren't entirely the same. Hobbes believed that people were basically brutish and violent. Remember, Hobbes said that man's natural state is that life is nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes had of course, remember, all these men are still influenced by Christian theology. They either believe in or they're influenced by the idea of original sin. Right? So remember, when we're talking about people, we're talking about men who are living inside of an officially totally Christian society. But and the people around them, the ordinary people in the village down the road, don't believe these things. Not yet. They still believe whatever the preacher says in church. Okay? But these men are planting these seeds. By now, however, everybody assumes these things, right? The descendants of those peasants now assume all these things, right? So Hobbes believes that people were basically brutish and violent, that an authoritarian, powerful government has to tame the people and make them realize what their self-interest is. By golly, work for your self-interest, and here's how we're going to do it. So Hobbes writes the Leviathan, which is about an all-encompassing state that takes care of everything in order to promote the social contract and to preserve the social contract. Whereas Locke believes that people are basically reasonable and tolerant. So Rousseau is more in that mindset, right, where people are really good,
the savage.
the le bon sauvage, and if you leave people to their own devices, they'll figure things out and so forth. And so Locke believes people just have to throw off the shackles of superstition, by which he means the church, right, and despotism, by which he means the monarchy and aristocracy and so forth. And they would naturally form enlightened republican societies. Okay. But also remember what's shocking, though, to modern leftists, that they might read these men and think that these are some good ideas, right? But all these men were very class conscious. Locke was part of writing the political documents to found the colony of Carolina in the United States. And he took for granted that there would be slaves and that there was a small enlightened class that would run everything. So these ideas are really for
Others.
For others, yeah. The bad part of the ideas is for others. The good part's for my group. The bad part's for your group, right? But both believe in the social contract. Now, among the American founding fathers, some are more pessimistic about human nature, like John Adams. So they'll tend to think more like Hobbes. Right? Now, there's more optimistic, like Jefferson, who's really loony, right? He follows Locke. Jefferson is. You could do a whole course on what's wrong with Jefferson.
He said that for the ideas of republic or something, they are so worthy that even everybody got killed and only 2 people remained.
Right. So that's why Jefferson was sympathetic to the Jacobins. It's one of the things he and Adams deeply disagreed about. Well, they were best friends before the French Revolution, but after it started, and then once they ran against each other for president, they were estranged for many years. Because Adams could see this is just going very bad way. Very bad way. Adams had much more realistic idea of the limitations of human nature and the limitations of republican government. Okay. But all the founders accepted the basic premise of this theory, right? That the individual is the basis of society. That enlightened self-interest is the best starting point for political organization. And for economics as well. I didn't mention economics, but also for economics. Right? That laws are basically, except in extreme cases, a good law is an agreement to leave each other alone, to pursue our own selfish interest. This is what, in today's world, that's called libertarianism. That's what the libertarians would say. Government's inherently bad. A law that what's the important thing is to leave each other alone, to be selfish.
No taxes.
Yeah, no nothing. No community. Right? Because in real libertarianism, community is not possible. Now, how should an Orthodox see this? So this whole approach to viewing human life together, to society, is deeply at odds with our Orthodox mindset, right? First of all, our relationship with God, not our self-interest, is a starting point for political theory. The law of God. Just read all the letters that saints wrote to kings, instructing them how to govern their kingdom. To read the scriptures, to read the fathers, to read the canons, to follow the law of God. Okay. Traditional law, based on the law of God, must be the foundation of human codes of conduct. Authority comes from above, not below. As a matter of fact, when modern lawgivers were writing laws, for example, the most obvious example is the Napoleonic Code. And Napoleon was the revolutionist par excellence, right? And the centralizer, the great rationalist, statist ideologue. But Napoleon, he couldn't invent laws from scratch. You'd go insane trying to do that. What did Napoleon do? He went back to the Code of Justinian. He had to. So that one of the reasons why the Western societies still function as well as they do is that our law codes to a great extent cannot escape going back to the traditional law codes of the Christian era and to the Roman law. Unfortunately, the way they're interpreted is through this crazy lens, right? And also other laws are written, and the approach to law that's taken is through this crazy lens, right? even if the actual laws might have precedent in Roman law or even church canon law. Okay? So traditional law is based on the law of God, and that must be the foundation of human codes of conduct. Authority comes from above, not from popular consent, right? Not the sovereignty of the people, but from the revealed will of God and also the natural law. Right? Secondly, the family and the nation are not artificial constructs. They're not the result of a voluntary, some kind of a contract between individuals. Family and nation are ordained by God. There's no truly human life apart from family and nation. Right? There's no state of nature in which there are merely individuals. Never existed. Only insane people, lunatics. The only, the word idiotis in Greek, idiot, and idiotis is someone who's totally by himself, who thinks only like himself.
We have idiots.
Well, we're surrounded by idiotis.
No, in Romanian it's the same.
The same word, idiot, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the word in Russian, idiot, and it's from the Greek idiotis. Idios means one's own. So an idiotis is someone who's locked inside of himself. So what they're saying is that the true natural person is an idiot, and that's what they've done today is created whole populations of idiots, right? People who are literally idiotis. They're locked up inside themselves, right?
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's what it is. Okay. Third, because a Christian nation is an extended family, the ruler is responsible not merely for negative laws to prevent gross violations of the social order, but for positive laws. Now, in your own family, do you only give negative laws? Oh, don't do that, don't do that. No, you tell the children, you must do this, you must help your mother. Right? We must pray together. We will fast together. We will work in the garden together. Positive laws, right? That's normal. Because without positive laws, the father cannot create the constructive, industrious, virtuous Christian environment in his home. He can't raise his children. Okay? Well, all political theory, as we've discussed in our political theory class earlier, all genuine political theory is based, and all economic theory should be based on the family. The model is the family. So the ruler is the father of the nation, and he creates positive laws as well as negative laws, but doesn't create out of thin air, but from the tradition of the church, right? To encourage all the temporal circumstances that provide for the peaceful pursuit of a virtuous life. If good rulers do not, that should be do not does. If good rulers do not impose a godly orthodoxy, the evil rulers will impose a diabolic orthodoxy. Okay? The idea of a neutral government and a pluralistic society and a values-free political philosophy is total bunk. Such a thing has never, ever existed. Okay? The idea of a hands-off government, everybody do their own thing, and it's never existed. They're talking about a mark of bad philosophies. They talk about things that have never existed and can never exist. Such a thing has never existed. There's always been an orthodoxy. There's always been a positive vision for what should be. And it's an orthodoxy. See? A neutral government will never exist. Okay.
Libertarians.
Pardon me?
Libertarians.
The libertarians are totally deluded.
No, they're low level.
Yes. Okay. This realization of these things directly affects our own relationship. We're citizens of the United States. And even if we're not citizens, even if we go back to the old country, they've imported now all the ideas, going back to the 19th century. When our countries were being born in the 19th century, getting liberated from the Turks or the Austrians, whoever, they were already importing these ideas because the Masons were in there. They were telling the peasants, oh, fight for orthodoxy or fight for Romania or fight for Greece or whatever. But they were, at the same time, they were creating constitutions and creating systems and recruiting all the young men to the lodges and spreading these ideas. Okay? So it affects our relationship with the American political order, but also political order back in the old country, right? With the liberal project, this 250-year-old project, right, of the destruction of normal human life. So in reaction here in America, at least, and generally in Europe and Britain and so forth, in reaction to the diabolic authoritarian schemes of the left, communism and socialism, blah, blah, the liberal right offers only the solution of American constitutionalism, Just go back to the Constitution. Everything will be fine. Okay? This has no spiritual power. Okay? Even if it... Now, I agree that if we actually went back to the letter of the Constitution, it would be much better than it is now. I agree with that.
There's no solution.
But that's not a real solution, right? It has no spiritual power. It can't fight the demons. Okay? Diabolic totalitarian ideologies and cults capture the deracinated, déraciné in French means rootless, uprooted. Okay, people are uprooted. Okay? So these diabolic ideologies, or the communism, Islam, cults, BLM, Antifa, whatever, okay, they capture deracinated individuals who are lonely, right? They're lonely and they have no direction. They're the products. The experiment works, right? They aim to produce this kind of person. They did it. Now they've done it in vast numbers, okay? Because these people are lonely. They're looking for community. They're looking for something to believe in. They're looking for the thrill of some kind of pseudo-spiritual energy, right? They want to dedicate themselves to something. So the liberal experiment has divorced man from God, church, family, local community, ethnic identity, and has offered him nothing in return except iPhones and flush toilets. Right? Just material comfort. So people are so frustrated and they're so depressed. Okay? So only a return to a society based on God's law, to orthodoxy, okay? Not constitutionalism, right, can save our society. So part of our Orthodox toolkit is just to have a realization of these things, right? Not get sucked into. Of course, I'm much more sympathetic to people who are fighting for the Second Amendment than people who want to steal our guns. So yeah, I'll fight for the Second Amendment. But I know that the Constitution of the United States is not the ultimate answer, right? It has no spiritual power. Only Christ has spiritual power. Only God has spiritual power. And but to know that, but it's very useful to know where these ideas come from, who started writing them, when they started spreading, and how they spread. Yeah, and be able to explain this to people, so that just a minute. So we want to be able to explain to our brothers and sisters, or explain to any interested neighbor, friend, relative, to be able to explain to them what their assumptions are. They don't realize they have these assumptions. And you start waking people up and saying, no, you realize you have these assumptions, but have you really asked yourself whether that's true or not? See? And of course they may look at you like you're crazy,
sure.
But some will say, oh, that's right, I haven't thought of that.